Cold light, crowded corridor, shoes squeak, carts rattle, people drift past like they're late for something they hate. Officer_EC, calm, focused male officer, early 30s, medium athletic build, defined jawline, short textured dark hair, light stubble, slightly tired eyes, natural skin texture with pores, tactical police uniform with subtle wear marks, grounded, realistic expression, moves without urgency. K9_Shadow, black and tan German Shepherd, black saddle pattern, black facial mask, golden tan fur, upright alert ears, amber eyes, small notch on left ear, muscular structure, realistic fur texture, tactical K9 harness. Is steady at his knee, then Shadow stops. No bark, no pull, just a hard stillness. Ethan feels the leash go tight by 1 inch. A smell slips through the crowd. Chemical, wet fur, cold metal. Shadow's ears lock forward. Ethan doesn't look around fast. He looks once and realizes the space behind them just went quiet. The winter didn't announce itself with drama. It didn't roar like a movie storm or glitter in a way that made misery look beautiful. It simply pressed down, cold, absolute, and indifferent, until every sound in the town felt smaller, every street light looked tired, and every breath carried a thin edge that reminded you the world didn't care how long you'd already endured. Officer Ethan Cole drove with both hands at 9 and 3, not tight. Tight hands overcorrected. Tight hands turned small problems into wrecks. Ethan's hands were steady because his mind trained them that way. Discipline wasn't a personality trait for him. It was a survival system. He didn't speed. He didn't weave. He didn't chase noise. He let the cruiser roll through the dark like it belonged there, the heater pushing air that never quite reached his bones. In the passenger side K9 insert, Shadow sat upright in his tactical harness, perfectly balanced like the vehicle was an extension of his body. The German Shepherd's ears made small, precise adjustments, micro readings of the cabin, the road, and the invisible things people pretended didn't exist until they were too late. Shadow didn't pant, didn't whine. He just watched. Ethan could feel the dog's focus like a second set of senses in the car. It wasn't companionship. It was synergy. Silent communication forged through training and long nights that didn't end cleanly. The radio cracked once. Unit 12, respond. Possible animal distress. Abandoned structure off County Route 9. Caller reports. Sounds like yelping. Hard to hear. Weather's getting worse. Ethan didn't answer right away. He listened to the static between words. Static was honest. Static didn't pretend the system worked. Shadow's head turned slightly toward the dash, as if he understood the tone. Ethan glanced at him. One quick look. No human drama, no reassurance, just confirmation. Unit 12 copies, Ethan said. His voice was calm, low, and controlled, like he was reading off a checklist instead of driving into cold darkness. En route. He ended the transmission and let silence settle again. The town fell away fast. Stores, bars, the last open gas station with its fluorescent glow. Then the road narrowed. Trees closed in. Snow began to fall in thicker sheets, not beautiful, not gentle, just persistent. Wind dragged it sideways and erased the lines on the asphalt like the world wanted to take its shape back. Ethan had been on leave 2 weeks ago. Not official leave, not the kind with paperwork and a smile. The kind you get when your captain looks you in the eye and tells you to go home before your discipline cracks in a place where it can't be repaired. Functional, not alive. That's what Ethan had been. He could do the job. He could stand at a scene with blood in the snow and not flinch. He could talk a suspect down with a voice that never rose. He could keep his hands steady while everyone around him shook. But when the shift ended and the city quieted, he felt like a house with the lights on and nobody inside. Then a call like this came in. Animal distress, abandoned structure, winter weather, routine on paper. And still something in his chest tightened the way it did before an impact. Not fear, not excitement, a different kind of alertness. A test. To see if he still answered when something weak needed him. Shadow's nose lifted. A faint sound slipped into the cruiser through the vents. Wind, snow, and underneath it, something thin. A yelp. Not loud, not constant. A broken, urgent little thread. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't increase speed. He didn't rush. He just drove with the same deliberate pressure he used for everything, because if he lost control now, he'd lose it when it mattered. County Route 9 ended in a turnoff that wasn't really a road anymore, just a narrow, rutted path carved into the trees. The cruiser's tires crunched over old ice and new snow, the suspension complaining in muted thumps. Ethan killed the headlights before the last bend. The world outside went dim and colorless, a smear of white and black. The abandoned structure emerged like a bad memory. An old processing building, half swallowed by the woods, its windows dark, its roof lines sagging, its perimeter fence broken in places where time had done quiet violence. The wind hit the building and made it groan. Not in a haunted way, in a structural way, like something tired holding itself together because it didn't have a choice. Ethan parked with the engine running, the lights off. He watched for movement for a full 10 seconds, scanning with the slow, practiced sweeps that didn't look like scanning. Shadow stayed still. Then Ethan opened the door. Cold rushed in like punishment. Shadow exited first at Ethan's hand signal, no words. The dog moved low and controlled, paws landing softly despite the ice. Ethan followed, boots crunching once, then adjusting to place each step quieter. The flashlight stayed off at first. His eyes adjusted. Shapes came into focus, collapsed pallets, rusted bins, a chain-link fence that had surrendered to winter. The yelp came again, closer now. Ethan raised 2 fingers. Shadow froze, ears forward, nose working. Ethan clicked the flashlight on, briefly painting the ground in a narrow cone. Pawprints, small, multiple, fresh enough to still have crisp edges. And then another set, larger, adult. Ethan's throat tightened slightly. He moved toward the building's side entrance, a door that hung crooked on its hinges. The yelping turned into a thin, repetitive sound. Not panic, not play, distress. Shadow reached the doorway first, stopped, and looked back at Ethan. That look wasn't fear. Shadow didn't do fear like people did. It was question and confirmation in one. Ethan gave a small nod. Shadow entered. The air inside was worse than the cold. Stale rot, chemical residue, wet wood. A smell that told Ethan this place had once been used for something that mattered to someone's money and then abandoned when it stopped being profitable. Ethan's flashlight cut through dust motes and drifting snow that blew in through broken panels. At the far end, behind toppled crates, movement. A low shape. Then the beam caught eyes. Amber, not reflecting like a wild animal's panic. Fixed, watchful, a dog. German shepherd, black and tan, coat dulled by grime and snow, body lean in a way that didn't look like fitness. In front of her, a shallow hollow lined with torn insulation, barely a nest. Inside it, small bodies piled together, shivering. Puppies. Ethan's brain did a quick count without meaning to. 8, maybe 9. Their cries were thin, their movement sluggish. Hypothermia wasn't a theory here. It was a timeline. The mother dog didn't bark. She didn't charge. She didn't run. She stood between Ethan and the litter, a barrier made of exhaustion and resolve. Ethan recognized the stance before he recognized the reason, not aggression, duty. Shadow took 1 step forward, controlled. The mother's head lowered an inch. Her eyes stayed locked, on Ethan, not the dog. She was measuring him. Ethan breathed out slow. He lowered the flashlight beam, angling it away from her face. He crouched slightly, enough to remove height as a threat. Not enough to compromise reaction time. Easy, Ethan said, voice low. It came out rougher than he intended. Not because of emotion, because he hadn't used softness in his voice for a long time. Shadow remained still at Ethan's side, a silent anchor. Ethan reached for his radio. Unit 12 to dispatch, he said. Confirmed adult shepherd and litter in abandoned structure. Need animal control and... He paused, eyes on the pups. We need warm transport. This is hypothermia risk. Static. Then, copy. Animal control is 30 to 40 out. Roads are bad. Ethan felt the seconds stacking. 30 minutes in this cold wasn't 30 minutes. It was a countdown. He looked at the mother dog again. She looked back like she already knew that. Dispatch continued. Advise contain and wait. Do not attempt to handle without animal control present. Contain and wait. Ethan stared at the pups, their small bodies twitching, mouths opening for sound that barely came. He'd followed orders before. He'd followed them until they left him, with faces he still saw when the world went quiet. He clicked the radio once. Negative, he said. Just that. No argument. No drama. He clipped it back on. Shadow shifted slightly, reading his body. Ready. Ethan took off his outer gloves slowly so his hands could move with precision. He pulled his jacket open, creating a warm pocket of fabric and body heat. Then he did something that didn't feel like heroism. It felt like responsibility. He moved closer. The mother dog's muscles tensed, but she didn't lunge. She held, standing her ground. Ethan stopped at the edge of her personal space and waited a breath. He wasn't asking permission in words. He was offering a choice with his posture. The mother's nostrils flared. She looked at Shadow, then back to Ethan, and inch by inch she stepped aside. Not surrender. A corridor. A narrow, deliberate space between duty and survival. Ethan exhaled and moved in. He didn't grab, he didn't rush. He slid one hand under the smallest puppy, felt how cold the little body was, too cold. He lifted it gently and tucked it against his chest under his jacket. The puppy's cry stopped, swallowed by warmth. The mother dog watched every millimeter of movement. Shadow stayed still, head slightly lowered, non-threatening and ready. Ethan reached for the next puppy, and the next. He wasn't thinking in words, he was thinking in actions. Stabilize, transport, heat. Stabilize first, then solve. When he had 4 pups against his chest, he stood carefully. The mother dog stepped forward, nose near his jacket. Not to bite, to check. Ethan met her eyes. "I'm taking them," he said quietly. "You too." She didn't move. Shadow turned his head toward the door, then back. A question? Ethan understood. He took one slow step toward the exit, keeping his body between the mother and Shadow, a moving wall of calm. The mother dog followed. Once. Then she stopped and looked back at the nest. The remaining pups. Her body trembled with indecision that wasn't fear. Math. How many can I carry? How many can I keep alive? Ethan's chest tightened. He couldn't speak her language, but he understood the equation. He glanced at Shadow. "Go," he said softly. Shadow moved, quiet, precise, back toward the nest, not touching, not taking, just placing his body where the mother could see a path. A second corridor. The mother dog made her decision. She picked up a puppy, gently in her mouth, and followed Ethan. The pup dangled limp, but breathing. Ethan led them out into the storm. Behind him, the abandoned building groaned again, like it resented losing the only living thing inside it. The precinct annex wasn't designed for miracles. It was a small, practical building 2 blocks from the main station. Storage, paperwork, overflow, a cramped break room with a microwave that never worked right. But it had heat, clean water, and a door that locked. Ethan carried the pups inside first. He didn't announce it. He didn't ask permission. He moved like a man who had already decided the consequences were worth it. Shadow padded in behind him, snow melting off his harness in dark droplets. The mother dog followed last, stepping into the light and stopping at the threshold. Her eyes swept the room, corners, exit routes, the glowing heater vent like it was a hazard. Ethan placed the pups on a folded blanket near the heater and immediately set another blanket over them like a roof, trapping warmth. He filled a bowl with lukewarm water and set it a few feet away, then backed off. Space, respect. The mother dog approached the pups and circled them once, then lay down with her body curved around them. A living wall. Ethan's chest tightened in a way he didn't like. It wasn't pain. It was something thawing. He reached for his phone and called Captain Maria Hayes. She answered on the second ring. "Cole," she said, voice steady, "where are you?" "Annex," Ethan replied. "I pulled a litter out of an abandoned building. They were freezing. Mother came with." Silence for a beat. Then, "Animal control says you were advised to wait." "I know." Another beat. Ethan could hear her breath through the line, controlled, annoyed, but not surprised. "You couldn't," Hayes said. "No," Hayes exhaled. "Is anyone injured?" "Pups are weak, cold, possibly worse." "Keep them contained. Don't turn the annex into a public attraction. I'll send Lena." Ethan's mind registered the name. Dr. Lena Moore, Department Forensic Analyst. Brilliant, quiet, the kind of person who could look at a tiny detail and pull a whole story out of it. She wasn't a vet, but she was the closest thing the department had to someone who understood cause and effect in flesh. "Copy," Ethan said. He ended the call and turned back to the dogs. Shadow sat near the door, facing outward, ears forward. Guard posture, not aggressive. Sentinel. The mother dog's eyes remained on Ethan, watching, measuring. Ethan moved carefully around the room, gathering what he needed. A clean towel, a small portable heater, a thermometer from the first aid kit, a shallow tray for warmed milk replacement. He kept his motions slow and visible. Shadow watched too, not because he didn't trust Ethan, because Shadow's job was to read every environment like it might change in a second. Deputy Lucas Reed burst into the annex 10 minutes later. He was young, breathless, cheeks red from the cold, energy crackling off him even before he spoke. Then he saw the dogs and stopped so hard his boots squeaked. "Oh, my—" Lucas started, then caught Ethan's look and lowered his voice instantly. "Sorry, Captain said you needed help." Ethan didn't turn. He was kneeling near the puppies, checking their temperature with a gloved hand, counting breaths. "Quiet," Ethan said. Lucas nodded too fast, as if nodding could erase the fact he'd almost startled a protective mother in a strange place. He came closer with careful steps. "What happened?" Lucas whispered. Ethan kept it clipped. "Found them in an abandoned building. Cold exposure, possible toxins." "Toxins?" Lucas's eyebrows shot up. Ethan turned his head slightly. "Don't say that on open channels." Lucas nodded again. "Right, copy, sorry." Then, because Lucas was Lucas, his instinct to help outran his instinct to shut up. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Reed." Ethan's head snapped toward him. Lucas froze mid-transmission, thumb hovering. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Don't," he said. Lucas swallowed. "I was just going to—" "I know what you were going to do," Ethan said. "And I'm telling you not to." Lucas lowered his hand, embarrassed. Ethan softened it by a fraction. "Get blankets, warm water, anything soft, no sudden moves, no visitors." Lucas nodded and moved, quieter now. Shadow's gaze tracked Lucas for a second, then returned to the door. The mother dog's eyes tracked Ethan. The smallest puppy twitched under the blanket and made a sound like a weak hiccup. Ethan's chest tightened again. He wasn't thinking about adoption. He wasn't thinking about happy endings. He was thinking about heat transfer and time, and the fact that something about this felt like a test he didn't remember signing up for. Dr. Lena Moore arrived with a hard case and a calm that made the room feel larger. She wore a dark coat, hair pulled back, eyes sharp and introspective. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't approach fast. She looked at the mother dog, then at Shadow, then at Ethan. "Show me," she said. Ethan gave her a quick rundown. Lena knelt beside the pups, not touching yet, just observing. Her gaze took in details Ethan's brain would have noted but not named. Dried residue on fur, slight discoloration around mouths, a faint chemical smell underneath wet dog. "Exposure," Lena murmured, "not just cold." Ethan felt the tension in his jaw harden. "Toxin." Lena's eyes lifted to his. "Likely, maybe ingestion, maybe contact. Either way, it's not a natural accident." Lucas, holding a stack of blankets, swallowed loudly. "So, someone did this," he whispered. Lena didn't dramatize it. Someone put them somewhere they would die. Ethan's breath came out slow. In his mind, the abandoned building wasn't just a building anymore. It was a dumping ground, a cleanup site. He'd seen that logic before, different context, same cruelty. Hayes called again an hour later. Ethan answered on speaker, voice low. "Update," Hayes said. Lena spoke first. "Pups are hypothermic and showing signs consistent with chemical exposure. I need samples, fur, bedding, anything from the site." Ethan's eyes flicked to Shadow. "We can go back." Hayes paused. "Weather's worsening, and if you're right about a person behind this, they might return." Ethan stared at the window. Snow thickened outside, swirling in a way that hid edges. "Then we don't wait," Ethan said. Hayes's voice sharpened slightly. "Cole," Ethan kept his tone calm. "Ma'am, whoever left them there may come back to erase what's left. If we don't move, we lose evidence." Silence. Then Hayes measured. "Discreet push only. No hero work. You observe, you collect, you disengage if you have to. Understood?" Ethan's answer was immediate. "Understood." Shadow rose as if the word itself was a cue. The mother dog shifted, sensing movement and intention. She stood, placed herself between Ethan and the pups again. Protective. Ethan stopped and faced her. He didn't reach, he didn't force. He just lowered his posture slightly and spoke with the same calm he used on panicked humans. "We're coming back," he said softly. "We're keeping them alive." Her ears flicked. Her eyes held him. Then, slowly, she stepped aside again. Not surrender, consent. Ethan felt something in his chest loosen by a millimeter. Not peace, permission. They left the annex with Shadow at Ethan's side and Lucas trailing behind, tense and trying to be useful without being loud. The mother dog stayed because the pups stayed. Ethan didn't like leaving them, but he understood the math. Stabilize first, then solve. When they returned to the abandoned building, the whiteout had thickened. Visibility shrank. The world felt closer, harsher. Ethan's flashlight cut through swirling snow like a blade through smoke. Shadow moved first, nose low, tracing their earlier path. Ethan followed, and he saw it. Fresh tire tracks near the fence, not from official vehicles. Different tread, new. His pulse didn't spike. It steadied. That was worse. Steady meant the part of him that had been sleeping was awake. Lucas swallowed behind him. That wasn't us. I know, Ethan said. Shadow's ears snapped forward. A sound, not wind, metal, a door, somewhere inside. Ethan lifted a hand. Stop. Lucas froze. Ethan's mind did what it always did under pressure, narrowed to essentials. Someone was here. Someone came back. And in a storm like this, it wasn't to rescue. It was to erase. Ethan moved through the broken doorway with Shadow in front, silent as a shadow itself. The building seemed louder now, every creak amplified, every gust turning loose sheet metal into a thin scream. The flashlight beam swung low, avoiding windows. Shadow stopped near the nest area. Ethan's light caught something that wasn't there before. A bag, plastic, half covered in snow that had blown in. Lena's voice echoed in his head. Chemical exposure. Ethan stepped closer, careful. The bag had a label, partially torn. Industrial cleaning concentrate. The kind used to wipe down surfaces, the kind that could burn skin, poison small bodies. Ethan's jaw tightened. He reached for an evidence bag, gloved hands moving with precision. Then Shadow stiffened. Ears forward. Body coiled. Ethan froze. The sound came again. Footsteps on metal grating deeper inside the building. Not wind. Human. Ethan angled his flashlight off. Darkness swallowed the edges. Lucas's breathing behind him got loud. Ethan lifted 2 fingers, quiet. Shadow turned his head and looked at Ethan. Question. Ethan's answer was in the smallest motion. Wait. Footsteps drew closer. A silhouette moved through a gap between crates, hood up, shoulders hunched, flashlight in hand. Ethan didn't get to see a face, but he saw intention. Scanning, searching, checking for what remained. Cleanup. The person stopped near the nest area, saw the blankets Ethan had left earlier to hold the pup's warmth. The silhouette's posture shifted, annoyed. Then the person reached into a pocket. Ethan's hand moved to his weapon, not drawing, just ready. He felt Shadow's muscles tighten, prepared for command. The silhouette stepped closer and raised their flashlight. Ethan made a decision in the same place he'd made 1,000 others. He didn't surge. He didn't shout. He spoke. Police, Ethan said, voice low but carrying. Drop it. The flashlight beam jerked. The silhouette spun. Ethan's light snapped on, landing on gloved hands and a canister. The person froze for half a second, the length of time a human decides whether to run or fight. Then they ran. Ethan moved. Lucas, stay, he snapped. Lucas hesitated, then obeyed. Shadow launched forward at Ethan's hand signal. Fast, controlled, trained, not reckless pursuit. Tactical angle to cut off escape routes. The silhouette crashed through a side door into the storm. Ethan followed, boots hitting the snow, cold biting into his lungs. Shadow's dark form cut through white. The figure sprinted toward a vehicle near the fence. Ethan's brain clocked it. If they get away, they come back later, or they vanish. Either way, the pups stay threatened. Shadow closed the gap. Ethan shouted, "Stop!" The figure fumbled with keys. Shadow lunged, not to bite blindly, but to intercept. The figure swung an arm. Something metallic flashed. A tool. A strike aimed at Shadow's head. Ethan's voice broke the storm like a whip. "Shadow! Down!" Shadow dropped instantly, body flattening as the tool swung over empty air. Ethan surged, grabbed the figure's wrist, twisted. The tool hit the snow with a dull thud. The figure bucked, tried to wrench free. Ethan applied pressure, controlled force, not rage. In the blur of white, the figure's hood slipped, revealing only part of a face. Male, late 20s, eyes wide with panic and calculation. Not a mastermind. A runner, a worker in someone else's machine. Ethan forced him to the ground. Lucas arrived, breathless, cuffs out. "Got him," Lucas said, voice shaking with adrenaline. Ethan held the man down and spoke close to his ear. "Who sent you?" Ethan asked. The man spat snow and shook his head. "I don't know." Ethan's tone stayed calm. "You do. And if you don't, you're going to sit in a cell while those puppies die from what you brought. Decide who you want to be." The man's breathing hitched. His eyes flicked toward the building. Ethan saw the shift. Not remorse. Fear. The man began. "There's more inside." Ethan's blood went cold. "More what?" he said. The man swallowed hard. "Fuel. They were going to burn it, clean it, all of it." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Burn it. A fire hazard in a compromised building during a storm. And the mother dog and pups were back at the annex. Safe for now, but the truth was here, and the people behind this were still out there. Ethan made the next decision. He called Captain Hayes. "Ma'am," Ethan said, breath fogging in the cold, "we've got one in custody. He says there's fuel inside and they plan to burn the site. We need units and fire." Hayes's voice came through tight. "Copy? Get out, now." Ethan looked at the abandoned building. Dark, groaning, wind feeding it oxygen, like a living thing waiting for a spark. "Understood," Ethan said. Then the mother dog flashed in his mind, her stare, her corridor of consent, her silent assignment of trust. Ethan's jaw hardened. This wasn't just evidence, this was intent, and intent didn't stop with one runner. They got back to the annex fast, lights low, movements controlled. Inside, the mother dog rose when Ethan entered, eyes burning with alertness. She could smell it. Adrenaline, snow, danger. Ethan approached slowly. "One of them came back," he said quietly, as if she could understand words. "But we stopped it." The mother dog's gaze flicked to Shadow, then back to Ethan. A pup made a weak sound under the blankets. One pup, smaller than the rest, shifted strangely. Ethan crouched, lifted the blanket edge. The pup's breathing was wrong, too shallow, too slow. Ethan's chest tightened like a fist closed around his heart. He reached in gently, touched the pup's ribs. Cold again. No, worse than cold. Fading. The mother dog moved in, nose touching the pup. Then she did something that wasn't animal instinct anymore. It was choice. She picked the failing pup up, carried it 2 steps, and placed it directly in front of Ethan's hands. Not begging. Assigning. Custody. Ethan swallowed hard. He'd carried wounded men like that. He'd watched hands place someone's life into his arms and felt the weight of it like a sentence. He looked at Lena. "Now?" he said. Lena was already moving. Heater closer, warm towel, small syringe for tiny amounts of warmed formula. Lucas stood frozen, eyes wide, guilt in his posture. Ethan didn't scold him. This wasn't about blame. This was about seconds. Ethan cradled the pup against his chest under his jacket, breathing slow, steady, feeding warmth into the fragile body. Shadow sat close, head lowered, eyes fixed, not on the pup, but on Ethan. A silent reminder. You're here. You're steady. You can do this. Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "Stay." The call came from Captain Hayes as the night deepened. Units were moving. Fire was en route. Weather was worsening, and Lena's test came back with a certainty that made Ethan's stomach twist. The exposure wasn't incidental. It was deliberate. Someone used chemicals to silence the litter, to wipe away a trail, to make a rescue look like a tragic accident. No one investigated too hard. Ethan listened to Hayes's instructions, then hung up and stared at the window. Outside, the storm thickened again, swallowing the streetlights, closing the world into a tight white fist. Inside, the annex was warm, but it didn't feel safe. Not anymore. Because now Ethan understood the real stakes. This wasn't just about saving the puppies. It was about stopping someone who treated life like garbage. And Ethan knew what happened when people like that realized you were in their way. Shadow rose and moved to the door, ears forward. A sound outside. An engine? Maybe. Or wind shifting. The mother dog stood, body angled toward the pups, ready. Lucas swallowed, voice small. "Ethan?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He placed the failing pup carefully back into the warmth, watched its tiny chest rise, still fighting. Then he stood. His movements were calm, but final. He checked his weapon, checked his radio, checked Shadow's harness. He looked at Lena. "You stay with them." Lena nodded once, expression steady. "Bring back the world's consequences," she said softly. "I'll keep the fragile things alive." Ethan looked at Lucas. "You're with me." Lucas straightened like a man stepping into a lesson he'd never forget. "Yes, sir." Ethan corrected him gently, without softness. Just yes. They stepped into the storm, Shadow at Ethan's side. And somewhere in the whiteout, someone else was moving too, returning to erase what they thought was disposable. Ethan's breath fogged in the cold as he set his gaze forward. Functional wasn't enough anymore. Not tonight. Tonight, he was choosing to be present. The whiteout didn't just reduce visibility. It reduced options. Snow moved sideways in hard sheets, blowing across the street like something poured from a bucket. The annex exterior light turned every flake into a flying shard, and beyond that small halo, the world disappeared. Trees, buildings, the corner of the lot. Everything was swallowed by the same blank pressure. Ethan kept his shoulders loose as he walked. Loose shoulders meant you could react. Tight shoulders meant you were already bracing for impact. Shadow moved at his left knee, body close but not crowding, harness straps dark against his thick coat. The dog's ears were forward, not rigid, listening. His nose took in the storm like it was reading a language Ethan couldn't. Lucas followed one step behind, trying to match Ethan's pace. He was quieter now, not because he wasn't scared, because he finally understood that fear made noise and noise made mistakes. Ethan clicked his radio once. "Unit 12, moving." Dispatch answered with a burst of static and a voice that sounded distant even though it shouldn't have. The storm interfered. Systems always suffered first. "Copy," came Captain Maria Hayes. "Cole, I have one unit 5 minutes out to your position. Fire is staged, but they're delayed by road conditions. I want you to observe only." Ethan's eyes stayed on the darkness beyond the light. Understood. He didn't argue. He didn't promise. He didn't explain the truth. That observe only was a wish people made when they didn't have to stand in the snow and feel the weight of what was about to happen. The runner they'd caught had said fuel. Fuel meant a plan. A plan meant someone else was coming. Ethan's instincts didn't scream. They didn't panic. They simply aligned. Stabilize first, then solve. They reached the cruiser, and Ethan opened the rear door. Shadow hopped in with smooth control, then sat, steady and alert, eyes fixed forward like he'd already mapped the route. Ethan slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and turned the wheel with careful pressure. He didn't speed, even though every nerve in his body wanted to. Speed made you miss details. Details saved lives. Lucas climbed in, seatbelt clicking. His knee bounced once, then stopped when Ethan looked at him. "Breathe," Ethan said. Lucas tried. "Yeah, right." Ethan drove out of the annex lot, tires crunching over new snow, then onto the road that led back toward the abandoned structure. The storm thickened as they moved. The world narrowed to headlights and the faint suggestion of tree trunks. Ethan didn't use high beams. High beams lied. They bounced off snow and blinded you with your own fear. Shadow's nose touched the metal divider once, twice, as if confirming what his ears already knew. Ethan felt it before he saw it. A different vibration in the air. Not wind, not snow. Engine noise, low, idling. Ethan killed the headlights 20 yards early and let the cruiser roll silent into darkness. Lucas leaned forward, mouth opening. Ethan lifted one finger. Lucas closed his mouth. They crept up the last bend toward the abandoned structure. And there it was. A vehicle parked near the broken fence line. Dark, not official, angled like it had arrived quickly and expected to leave quicker. Its lights were off. Exhaust puffed faintly in the air, a ghost of warmth against the freezing white. Ethan's jaw tightened. Shadow's body went still. Ethan's mind did the inventory automatically. One vehicle visible. Unknown occupants. Abandoned structure ahead. Compromised. Fuel risk. Storm. Limits sight. Muffles sound. Gives cover. Evidence inside. And back at the annex, a mother and pups relying on heat and quiet. This wasn't a scene for heroics. It was a scene for control. Ethan touched his radio, whispering into it. "Hayes, I've got an unmarked vehicle at the site. Likely secondary party." Static, then Hayes's voice sharpened. "Cole, do not engage alone. Hold position until backup arrives." Ethan stared through the windshield at the unmarked vehicle. Hold position. But if they were here, they weren't here to look around. They were here to finish something. Ethan's breathing slowed. He opened the door. Cold hit like punishment. Shadow exited behind him at a hand signal, silent as the storm itself. Lucas got out too, hands clenched, eyes wide. Ethan spoke without turning. "Stay behind me. Do what I say. No freelancing." Lucas swallowed. "Yes." Ethan corrected again, quieter. "Good." They approached the fence line, low and controlled. Ethan kept his flashlight off. Shadow's paws barely made sound on the snow. A door on the abandoned structure's side was cracked open. Warm air shouldn't exist here, but it did, just slightly, like someone had been inside recently. Ethan smelled it next. A sharp tang, chemical and metallic. Fuel. Lucas's breath came loud. He tried to control it. Couldn't. Shadow stopped suddenly, head lifting. Ethan froze. A sound, faint, irregular, not wind, clinking, metal can against metal. Someone was moving fuel cans. Inside. Ethan's brain wanted to surge, to rush in and stop it. But rushing was how you died in places like this. He crouched, pulled Lucas down with a light grip on his sleeve. "Listen," Ethan whispered. Lucas blinked, trying to focus. Ethan lifted 2 fingers toward Shadow, then pointed toward the door. Shadow's eyes flicked. His posture shifted into ready. Ethan whispered, almost soundless, "Search." Shadow moved forward, nose low, tracking the freshest scent line slipping out of the doorway. His body was tight but controlled, as if he were a blade being guided, not a dog being unleashed. Ethan followed, weapon drawn now but lowered, muzzle down, discipline intact. Lucas stayed a pace behind, hands near cuffs, trying not to shake. Inside the structure, the storm's roar dulled, replaced by creaks and the faint slosh of liquid. Ethan's flashlight flicked on in a narrow beam. The light caught fuel cans stacked near a support column. The column's wood was dark with age. The ceiling above sagged under ice and snow weight. This place wanted to collapse. And then Ethan saw the men, 2 silhouettes near the cans. One was pouring something into a shallow tray. The other held a lighter, not subtle, not cautious. They weren't cleaning evidence. They were preparing a burn. Ethan's pulse stayed steady because he forced it to. He spoke. "Police," Ethan said, voice calm and cold as the air. "Hands where I can see them." The men froze. For half a second, all 3 of them held still in the thin beam of light. Then one of the men did something Ethan had been expecting, because men who came to burn something didn't plan to surrender. He moved toward the lighter. Ethan's voice snapped, louder now. "Don't!" The man flicked the lighter anyway. Ethan didn't fire. Instead, he did what disciplined officers did when the problem was bigger than ego. He gave Shadow the command. "Shadow, take!" Shadow launched. Not wild, not chaotic, precise. The dog hit the man's forearm with controlled force, clamping down just enough to stop the lighter from functioning, just enough to take the hand out of the equation without tearing the man apart. The lighter fell, useless, into the snow-dusted floor. The second man bolted toward the exit. Lucas stepped forward instinctively. "Freeze!" The man didn't. Lucas surged after him. Ethan's head snapped. "Reed, stop!" Lucas hesitated, half a second too late. The fleeing man slammed through the side door, throwing it open, and the storm rushed in like an animal. Wind, snow, and worse, oxygen. The fuel smell thickened instantly. Ethan's stomach dropped. The lighter wasn't the only ignition source. A spark from metal hitting metal, a static pop, anything. This place was now a breath away from becoming an inferno. Ethan yanked Lucas back by the collar before Lucas could chase into white nothingness. "Inside!" Ethan snapped. "You chase him, you die out there, and you take us with you." Lucas's face went pale. Shame flashed hard. He nodded once, tight. Shadow was still on the first man, pinning him with controlled dominance. Ethan moved in fast, weapon still down but present, voice like ice. "Release!" Shadow released instantly and stepped back, body between Ethan and the man, eyes sharp. The man gasped, clutching his arm, fear in his posture. Ethan cuffed him with quick, practiced movements. Then the building creaked, a deep, ugly groan. Ice shifted on the roof, snow weight redistributed. The whole place shuddered. Ethan's flashlight beam snapped upward, caught a seam splitting in the ceiling. A support beam bowed. Lucas's eyes widened. "Ethan!" Another crack, louder. wood splitting under stress, and then, in the corner of Ethan's flashlight beam, he saw the fire hazard they'd created by opening that door. The shallow tray of fuel sloshed as the floor vibrated. It tipped. Fuel spilled across old boards like oil. Ethan's mind went cold and fast. If that fuel reached the rusted heater unit in the corner, dead now, but full of old metal, if anything sparked. He didn't wait for the perfect plan. He issued the only plan that mattered. "Out!" Ethan snapped. He grabbed the cuffed man by the jacket and shoved him toward the exit. Lucas pushed behind, half dragging, half steering. Shadow moved at Ethan's knee, close and fast. They burst through the doorway into the storm. The wind hit them like a wall. Behind them, the structure groaned again. And then the roofline shifted. It didn't collapse all at once. It failed like a tired body giving up. A section of roof caved inward with a sound like thunder, snow, and debris pouring down into the interior. Ethan's breath caught. Not for himself, for what the collapse meant. If the roof collapsed near the fuel, this wasn't just evidence destruction anymore. It was an uncontrolled hazard that could ignite and spread into the woods, into nearby structures. Ethan shoved the cuffed man toward Lucas. "Get him to the cruiser, now." Lucas grabbed the man, stumbling through snow. "Yes." He corrected himself mid-word. "Got it." Ethan turned back toward the building. Shadow turned too, waiting for command. Ethan's radio crackled, Hayes's voice cutting through static. "Cole, status!" Ethan pressed the mic. "Roof collapse at site, fuel present, 2 suspects, 1 in custody, 1 fled into storm. We need fire and units now." "Cole, disengage," Hayes snapped. "Do you hear me? Disengage." Ethan stared at the dark shape of the collapsing structure. He felt the old instinct rise, the one that always whispered, "Go back, go in, fix it, even if it cost you." He'd lived with that instinct. It had saved people, and it had taken pieces of him with it. Tonight the math was different. Tonight he wasn't alone. He had Shadow. He had a duty to return intact, because back at the annex, fragile lives depended on his steadiness, not his sacrifice. He took one final look at the building. Then he made the harder choice. He stepped back. "Shadow," Ethan said. "Heel." Shadow came immediately. They moved to the cruiser. Lucas had the suspect secured in the back seat, breath coming fast, cheeks wet from melted snow and adrenaline. "I'm sorry," Lucas blurted. When he ran, Ethan didn't let him spiral. He cut it clean. "Lesson learned," Ethan said. "You're alive. That's what matters." Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. Ethan got in, started the engine, and turned the cruiser around with careful control. The storm swallowed their tracks behind them. But Ethan's mind didn't let go of the one piece that mattered most. Not the suspects, not the fuel, not the roof. The mother-dog's silent handoff, the pup's fading breath. He drove back toward the annex like it was a lifeline. Because it was. The annex door opened into warmth that felt like mercy. Ethan stepped inside and the smell hit him first. Clean blankets, warmed formula, the faint metallic sting of antiseptic from Lena's kit. Lena was on the floor near the heater, posture steady, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused like she was holding a fragile universe together with sheer attention. The mother dog stood over the pups, body curved, eyes locked on Lena, not hostile, demanding. Ethan crouched beside them, the storm's cold still clinging to his coat. "How's the pup?" he asked, voice low. Lena's eyes flicked up. "Still with us," she said. "Barely, but she's fighting." Ethan let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Shadow moved quietly into the room and sat near the door again, sentinel posture, guarding the perimeter without being told. Lucas stepped in behind Ethan, shoulders hunched, eyes drawn to the puppies like he was afraid to breathe too hard. Ethan looked at the mother dog. Her amber eyes met his. Then she lowered her head toward the smallest pup, nudged it gently with her nose, and stepped back, just an inch. Space. Not for Lena, for Ethan. Like she was saying, "Your turn." Ethan's throat tightened. He reached in with slow, careful hands and lifted the tiny pup into the warmth of his palms. It was so small it didn't feel real. A handful of life. Its breathing was shallow, but present. Ethan tucked the pup against his chest again, under his jacket, letting his body heat do what it was designed to do. He didn't speak to anyone else. He spoke to the pup. "Stay," he whispered. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. Lena prepared the syringe with warmed formula, measured to the smallest drop. Ethan held the pup steady. Shadow watched, and in that quiet triangle, man, dog, fragile life, something in Ethan's chest finally broke open. Not in a dramatic way, in a slow, steady way, like ice giving way under spring light. A tear slid down his cheek before he realized it. Then another. His shoulders didn't shake, his breath didn't hitch. He just let it happen, because no one in that room would punish him for being human. Lucas looked away, throat working, ashamed of his earlier noise, ashamed of how close he'd come to making everything worse. Lena said nothing. She simply continued her work with the respect of someone who understood that strength and grief could occupy the same body. The mother dog stepped closer. She didn't whine. She didn't beg. She pressed her muzzle gently against Ethan's knee. A touch, a grounding, a silent understanding. Ethan swallowed hard, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He looked at Shadow. Shadow's amber eyes held him steady. No judgment, just presence. Minutes passed. Then a small change. The pup's breathing deepened, just slightly. Its tiny mouth opened, searching. Lena eased the syringe in, delivered a drop. The pup swallowed. Ethan felt it. A faint movement that said, "I'm still here." He exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and surrender. Lena's voice softened. "That's it," she murmured. "Good girl. Stay with us." Ethan watched the pup's ribs rise, watched them fall, watched them rise again. And for the first time in a long time, he felt the urge to protect something without expecting to lose it. The radio crackled. Hayes's voice came through, clipped. "Cole, status report." Ethan reached for the mic, but he didn't stand. He didn't step away from the heat. He stayed where he was, close to the vulnerable thing that needed him. "2 suspects," Ethan said. "1 in custody, 1 fled. Structure partially collapsed. Fuel hazard, fire and units requested." "Copy," Hayes said. Then, after a beat, her voice changed, softer. "And the pups?" Ethan looked at the tiny body in his hands, at the mother dog's eyes fixed on him, at Shadow sitting guard. He answered honestly. "We're holding them," Ethan said. "We're not losing them." Hours passed. The storm raged, then softened, then raged again in waves. Inside the annex, warmth and rhythm became law. Lena documented everything she needed: samples, residue, timeline. Lucas cleaned, replaced blankets, heated water. Quiet now, methodical, trying to earn back trust through action. Shadow rotated between the door and Ethan's side, always within range, always ready. The mother dog did what mothers did, watched, endured, believed. Near dawn, the pup's eyes fluttered open, not wide, not bright, but open, a sliver of awareness, a decision. Ethan's breath caught. He didn't speak. He just smiled, small, unguarded, like he didn't recognize his own face when it did that. The mother dog leaned in and licked the pup once. Then she looked at Ethan, and in that look was something that wasn't an animal's instinct anymore. It was trust. It was choice. It was, "You are ours now." Ethan's throat tightened again. He nodded once like he was accepting an oath. Epilogue. Weeks later, the case closed clean. Lena's evidence was airtight. Chemical traces, intentional placement, a pattern of dump sites that linked to an illegal operation using cover stories to avoid scrutiny. Hayes kept it quiet until she could hit hard, then hit once. No leaks, no half measures. The operation collapsed under the weight of proof, and the people who treated life like disposable inventory were finally forced to answer for it. But the story that mattered most wasn't the file in a cabinet. It was what happened in the annex on the nights no one posted about. The pups grew stronger. Their bodies filled out. Their eyes brightened. Their paws learned the confidence of warmth. Lucas became the one who arrived early to check the heat levels before anyone asked. Lena stopped pretending she didn't care and started leaving small notes on Ethan's desk. Feeding schedule, temperature checks, tiny observations that meant she was invested. Hayes didn't say much, but one day she walked into the annex, watched Ethan sitting on the floor with Shadow at his side and the mother dog curled around her litter, and she just nodded once. approval without performance. Ethan didn't name the mother dog right away. He didn't rush that kind of thing. Names meant permanence. Permanence used to terrify him. But one evening, when the smallest pup, the one who almost didn't make it, climbed over Ethan's boot and fell asleep against Shadow's paw, Ethan looked at the mother dog and finally spoke the word out loud. "Hope," he said. The mother dog lifted her head, ears forward, eyes steady, as if the name had always belonged to her and Ethan was simply late to admit it. Hope stayed bonded, not just to Ethan, but to Shadow. The two dogs moved around each other with a quiet respect, like they recognized the same job in different uniforms. When the pups were old enough, Hayes helped coordinate their placements. Not random, careful. Homes that understood what it meant to protect something fragile. One went to a family with a child who needed a steady companion. One went to a veteran support program. Another went to a search and rescue trainee handler who cried when she held the pup and promised out loud she'd never abandon him. Ethan watched each one go, feeling the strange twist of pride and loss and relief, like sending someone into the world and hoping it didn't hurt them too much. Hope remained, no debate, no question. She had chosen her place. And Ethan, finally, chose his too. He didn't suddenly become cheerful. He didn't turn into a man who loved crowds, but he stopped living like he was waiting for punishment. He started showing up. For work, for Shadow, for hope, for the small lives that kept proving the world was worth opening the door for. One morning after a late shift, Ethan walked the annex hallway with Shadow at heel and Hope padding beside them, and Lucas jogged up with a grin that was too big to hide. "Ethan," Lucas said, breathless, "Captain wants you." Ethan's stomach tightened the old way for a second. Then he let it go. He went into Hayes's office. Hayes didn't look up right away. She signed something, slid it aside, then finally met his eyes. "We're starting a new community outreach arm," she said, "working with rescues, abuse investigations, the stuff that falls between departments because it's messy." Ethan stayed silent. Hayes leaned back slightly. "I want you to lead it, with Shadow." Ethan felt something shift behind his ribs, not fear, a new kind of weight, purpose. Hayes continued, voice measured. "It's not glamorous, it's not clean, but it matters." Ethan nodded once. "Yes, ma'am?" Hayes's mouth tightened into something almost like a smile. "And Cole?" "Yes?" She paused. "Good to have you back." Ethan didn't answer with words. He left the office and walked back into the cold morning, Shadow and Hope moving at his sides like a living sentence. The snow fell lightly, not furious, just present. Ethan watched the flakes land on Hope's fur and melt. Watched Shadow's ears flick at distant sound. Watched Lucas jog behind them, carrying supplies, trying to be useful without needing applause. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel like he was surviving his own life. He felt like he belonged in it. And if someone asked him what changed, he wouldn't say a case. He wouldn't say a miracle. He'd say something quieter. He opened a door, and then he stayed open.